Hey, what's good everybody? I'm Isaac Lee and we back with another review of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is the third episode out of the 6 we're gonna get, so let's jump right into it. So Sam and Bucky, they went off to go see Zemo. They know where he is as far as being locked up for all of his crimes. Bucky is feeling like, you know what, I could probably get some answers out of him more so than you can because, you know, you're Avenger. We know how he feels about that. So they're going to go see him because they want to find out where all these super soldiers coming from. And they know that Hydra recreated their own little version. Bucky, he's talking to Zemo, and you know, Zemo, he tries to use a few of the code words to try to see if he can get Bucky to revert back to his old ways. And he's like, no, that's not gonna work. But you know, Zemo's looking at him, he's like, yeah, I know a little bit is there. So they're talking, and I like how the story kind of like skips forward to where Bucky and Sam are having a conversation talking about how much of an asset that he would be, and if it's even right to trust in him and try to use him to see where this super soldier serum is coming from. And one of the things he mentions that I didn't know was a foreshadow is that he brings up that, you know, this is the same guy that killed King T'Chaka and framed you for it. And he's like, do you think Wakanda is gonna let that go? And I'm like, oh, it might have been a foreshadowing, but at the time I didn't realize that until the very end of the episode. He ends up making his grand entrance. They're like, when did this happen? And then you find out that they had some whole game between him and Bucky and how they were gonna get him out, and they end up having to fly across the world to get all these connections. You know, apparently Zemo's been rich this whole time, or at least he was rich. They make mention of that. He's like, oh, where Sam was like, oh, so you had a plan this whole time? He's like, oh yeah, I was always born rich until your friends like destroyed everything. They end up going to Madripoor, and they gotta go there under different aliases and things like that. Like Sam is pretty much dressed like a pimp, but he has to pretend to be some guy named Smiling Tiger. He ends up having some exotic drink. Bucky, he has to pretend that he's still the Winter Soldier, and they have this nice little fight scene. I like the choreography on it. That goes well for a little bit until Sam's phone rings, and it happens to be his sister, and she's talking about the past incident at the bank and how they're gonna get the loan and things like that. So of course that doesn't work out. Then they end up finding another connect that leads them to the return of Sharon Carter. Sharon Carter being Peggy Carter's niece. So it was interesting to see her again. I didn't really, well, we saw her in the trailer, but I guess we didn't know when she was gonna pop into it. And we're finding out that, you know, she's still been on the run. And you know, Sam and Bucky, they've been forgiven for everything they've been having to do, so they don't have to go in hiding. Meanwhile, Sharon Carter, she's still in hiding, and she's still like, okay, nothing's changed for me. I can't even go home. My own father doesn't even know where I am. Despite her not being trusted by the country, she still has trust in, you know, Bucky and Sam. And they start talking, and they get the name of this one particular scientist who's breaking the code for this super soldier serum, and he's the guy who's working for the power broker. This whole episode is about who is the power broker, where can we find him. Now when it comes to the power broker, that's not somebody I'm really familiar with, so I had to look him up. And when I looked him up and I saw the first person to actually carry the mantle, his name was Curtis Jackson. Yeah, you heard that right. Curtis 50 Cent Jackson was the first person to hold the mantle of the power broker. So I was wondering, okay, what else can I connect with this? Well, he's the executive producer of the show Power, and then even his character on the show has the last name Stark. It's all connected. What if 50 Cent just shows up on the MCU as the power broker? That's my theory. I know it's a conspiracy, don't care. That's why I'm going with it. But anyway, another thing I want to touch on is the new Captain America and Battlestar while they're off doing other missions. It's interesting how on US soil it's hard for him to get, you know, the respect and people getting used to him being called Captain America. But then when he goes over to other countries to do certain missions, he still doesn't get that same respect. There's one particular moment where he's talking to a guy and he's like, do you know who I am? And he looks at him as if he's just a guy in cosplay, and he's like, yeah, I know who you're supposed to be, which is just interesting. So him and Battlestar are now on the heels of Sam and Bucky because word has gotten out that Zemo's broken out of jail, and they're thinking, okay, they must have partnered with Sam and Bucky and that this must have been plotted out a while back. So the way they go about it has even Battlestar concerned. He's like, okay, so we just off the books, no protocol, how are we gonna go about doing this? And this new Cap seems to have this mind state of by any means necessary, they're not gonna sweat us on how we do our job. So back to the adventures of Sam, Bucky, and Zemo. They end up taking a plane ride back to Latvia to really strategize about how they're gonna get closer to finding out who the power broker is. So they end up walking into this building, but then the camera kind of zooms in on Bucky because clearly something has caught his eye. So as they're walking into this building, Bucky's like, you know what, I'm gonna go take a walk, I'll catch up with you later. So he's walking up to this building and he finds one little black bead, and then he walks across the street and then he sees a second one, and he's familiar with these. He knows exactly who they belong to and who's probably tracking the same person that they are. He walks down this alley, he just immediately just yells out, I think you left something. So he turns around, turns back, and sure enough, it's a member of the Dora Milaje from from Wakanda. when Sam said, "Do you think Wakanda forgot?" And sure enough, when she sees Bucky, she says, "I'm here for Zemo." And it just made so much sense. T'Challa may have forgave him, but the Dora Milaje didn't forgive. I'm sure his sister Shuri didn't forgive. And even their mother, this man killed her husband. I'm sure she didn't forgive. They want Wakandan justice. You better believe that she showed up as the representative for not just the Dora Milaje, but for Wakanda. That's 3 episodes down, 3 to go. I'm really interested to see where they go with this, because I'm enjoying it, especially with a member of the Dora Milaje just popping up out of nowhere. But like I always say, those are just my thoughts. But what are yours? And if you like what I had to offer, hit that like and subscribe at the bottom. I'm Isaac Lee. This is The Rundown.